and it is a biodiversity panel. And we are going to have some amazing speakers joining us this afternoon, some in studio and some via Zoom. So we have Narelle McCarthy, she's going to be our host. Then we'll also be joined by Professor Stuart Parsons, by Meghan Halverson and Vanda. Oh my goodness, Grabowski. I hope I got that right, Vanda. Sitting next to me, I had a lesson just before. But anyway, Rachel Lyons, and also from Sandra Tuszynska and Robyn Jackson. So this is our panel. It's going to be fantastic. You have the chance to send in your questions. There will be a number that will come up across the bottom of the screen, and you can text in your question to that number. It is the normal cost associated with a text message. So if you have a question for any of the members of our panel, feel free to send that through, and we'll make sure that the message gets through to our moderator. So now we'll be back with you shortly with the Biodiversity panel.
Afternoon session of the World Environment Day Festival. Thank you so much to Rosanna Natoli for being such a fabulous host for the World Environment Day proceedings today. We're really honoured to have her here, and what a fabulous job she always does. My name's Narelle McCarthy. I'm with the Sunshine Coast Environment Council, and it's my pleasure to host the Biodiversity panel this afternoon. We're really privileged to have a great mix of presenters this afternoon. There's lots to learn, lots to share, so please stay tuned for the next hour or so. We're taking questions via the text number throughout the program, but we also have some wonderful presentations as well. We're extremely fortunate here on the Sunshine Coast to be a biodiversity hotspot. Biodiversity is the variety of life, and we've got plenty here on the Sunshine Coast to be a hotspot. Australia is known as one of the 17 megadiverse countries in the world. However, we've got an appalling track record in many respects for conservation of species. Some of our iconic species are actually under threat. And it's these wonderful people here on the panel that you'll meet this afternoon who will share their stories and what you can do to help conserve the wonderful species and endemic species of Australia, and certainly those that call the Sunshine Coast home. We're really pleased to be able to bring to you Dr. Stuart Parsons.
Well, what I thought I'd do is cover off some questions, really, that a lot of people ask me, whether I'm out and about in the public or doing panels like this. And these are usually things that are sort of front of mind for people with flying foxes. But I'll talk a little bit about other bats as well. So currently, very topically, people often ask whether or not they can actually get COVID-19 from Australian bats. And it's a really good opportunity to set that record straight. And the answer is no, you absolutely cannot. In fact, you can't get COVID-19 from any bat anywhere in the world. COVID-19 is actually a virus that has its origins in bats between 50 and 5 years ago, but it actually has to go through another species before it can mutate and infect humans. So you've got absolutely no chance of catching COVID-19 from a bat. Now, there are other things that you need to be aware of with bats. They don't actually have a lot of diseases. People like to think that they do, but in fact they don't. If you do see a bat on the ground or there's a bat in your house, you shouldn't handle it. You shouldn't really go near it because there are other things that bats carry, like Australian bat lyssavirus, which is a type of rabies, and the Hendra virus. But if you're not picking up or handling a bat, you've actually got no risk whatsoever from catching anything from them. I was talking before a little bit about whether or not bats carry a lot of diseases, and there was a really interesting study that was done. It only came out about 6 months ago. And it actually looked at all different groups of animals and looked at types of viruses that they have, and it looked at whether they carry diseases and things. And bats came out, and I'll use a quote, as wholly unremarkable. The reason that bats seem to have a bit of a bad rap is they tend to have a bit of a bad reputation anyway, which is not really that well founded. But they don't actually carry any more diseases than any other group of animals, or in fact people. And the diseases they carry, the vast majority of them can't be transmitted beyond bats. One of the things that's really interesting about bats, though, is that they tend not to get sick when they get these things. So the odd one will, from Australian bat lyssavirus or Hendra, but bats can actually tolerate viral infections really, really well. And the reason they can do this is for two reasons. First of all, they fly. And second of all, it's particular to their metabolism. So most bats, or most mammals, let's say, small ones, live fast, die young. And so they've got a very high metabolic rate, causes damage to their cells, just the same with us as we get older. And they tend to die after a couple of years. Bats can live for 41 years, running at this very, very high speed. And what you find is they actually get cellular damage, a lot like humans do, but they don't really react to it. They actually can switch on genes that actually keep them safe from this cellular damage. And they also tolerate free bits of DNA and RNA in their bodies, which is evidence of a virus being there. So they tend not to attack these viruses, and so they don't get sick. Which is why, we often get asked, if bats get these things, why aren't they all dead? And the simple answer is because they can tolerate a lot of these diseases. Another thing I often get asked is, why do bats seem to prefer urban areas? And the trick to that one is they don't. Prefer is the key word here. They'd far rather be out somewhere a long way from human beings, in the trees, eating the fruit, eating the pollen and things. The problem is that the habitat that they use, the trees, the native forests, are being cut down for lots of different reasons. And so we tend, as humans, we like to have lots of trees in our cities. And a lot of city councils have got policies where they plant lots of trees, create shade. It's absolutely lovely. But if you're a bat and you also need trees and things to eat, it's going to draw you into a city. It's going to draw you into where people are. So it's really not the bats preferring to be in cities. It's we've actually created a situation where it's the place they need to go to find places to live and to find food. So what can we do about that? In the short term, it's pretty difficult because it takes a long time for trees to grow. But what we should be thinking about is stopping chopping down trees that bats would like to live on and feed on, and actually start a sort of medium long-term plan of replanting these forests. And then the bats will leave. They'll leave and go out of our urban areas and live well away from us. I'm not sure how much time I've got. I can talk for days about that.
Oh, you certainly have a little bit more time, Stuart, because it really is a fascinating and an important topic that really needs to be shared.
All right, let's talk about something positive. Let's talk about the amazing things that bats do for us. So first of all, we've had these terrible bushfires down in New South Wales and Victoria, and there's been a few fires in Queensland as well. The regeneration of that forest relies on bats. Bats will carry the seeds, they'll carry the pollen of the plants that are needed to regenerate that forest. So number one, when we get these natural disasters, we need bats to be able to actually have that forest naturally regenerate. Bats are also really important pollinators. So if we think about some key wild crops, plantain, avocado, durian, if you like durian, personally, it's not a favorite of mine. And those of you that like tequila, not necessarily flying foxes, but the agave plant, the only natural pollinator of them is a bat. So there's a lot of things that we need bats for that we don't really see them doing. If we also think about our agriculture, a number of agricultural pests are moths. And a study in the US, and there's been equal studies done in Australia, shows that bats can save farmers up to $20 billion a year in the application of pesticides, because these groups that are known as Mexican or Brazilian free-tail bats move in their thousands over the cotton areas particularly, and they eat a lot of these moths that are going to be pests of agriculture. So these natural ecosystem processes, as we call them, are happening all the time. We know this is happening in cotton in Australia as well, helping out the cotton growers. There's also been a number of studies. A favorite topic of mine is wine, and bats actually controlling pests of vineyards. There's been studies in southern France that have shown that they're doing that. Macadamia crops in South Africa are protected by bats eating the insect pests. So all of these things are happening all around us all the time. We just don't see it because it happens at night. But without the bats, we would lose all of these services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's sometimes it's underestimated just how critical they are to the ecosystems and to the other services that they provide for our well-being and our food. And they've been given a very much maligned reputation because of certain urban conflicts in various areas, and that really needs to be overcome through education and a better understanding of their importance within the ecological systems and services, looking at better habitat protection, as you say, and ensuring that there is sufficient vegetation, because of the way that they migrate and move, as you could perhaps explain about some of that seasonal movements and why they go to different areas and different regions at certain times of the year, where they might sort of become more obvious in various roosts and than other people may not have seen before.
Yeah, yeah. And I do have some sympathy, for people living in, say, Bateman's Bay in southern New South Wales, when they had tens of thousands of bats come in and start living in their small community. The bats are loud. There is a smell. I don't particularly mind the smell. I've gotten used to it, but it does create a smell. There's droppings and things going places, and people get worried. And when you've got 10 or 20,000 bats coming down on your small community, I can understand why that bothers people. The thing is that if people try and move them on, they're just going to go somewhere else and become someone else's problem. And they will move on naturally on their own. There's usually a plant that's flowering, a particular plant, and that's why they've moved in, to use that food resource. And if you give them time, they'll move on their own. What we need to do is find a way where the people can actually live with them for that period of time when they're in their community, and then let them move on.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think it can be a little bit of a misconception when they do roost in numbers, that there's plenty of they are abundant, but in fact they are actually listed species and really facing some fairly devastating declines, aren't they?
Yeah, so there's lots of things that are going on that affect the bats beyond the fact that their forest and living areas are being cut down. The heat stress events, the heat waves that we've all had recently that affect us as well, they affect the bats really, really badly. And spectacled flying foxes in northern Australia became an endangered species after the last heat event. There's also grey-headed flying foxes moved in from Victoria into South Australia, into Adelaide. And in the last heat event that they had a number of them die. You can have thousands of bats dying from the heat events. The bushfires will have also killed a large number of bats as well. So there's all of these ecological pressures and things that are going on around them, and they're trying to survive. And the more we can do to help them, the better.
Yep, absolutely. And your research and your education is certainly critical to that protection and helping them recover. Thank you very much, Stuart. You'll be joining us for the Q&A session a little bit later on. So thank you very much for that. And just reminding everyone that you can text in questions through to the presenters, and we'll be looking forward to answering those and for you joining the discussion. Just like to now welcome Dr. Sandra Tuszynska. Sandra is an incredible person, I just have to say, and just so knowledgeable. Sandra is the Environmental Project Officer with Woodfordia, and also a fungi specialist at the overall, but also at the planting as well. So we're really delighted to be able to welcome Sandra to the biodiversity discussion this afternoon. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, looking good too.
Thank you. I've got this camera that keeps zooming in and out, so it's really weird. But hey, I'm a fungus, so fungi. Yeah, look, I love what Stuart had to say about bats, and I was wondering also, later on to ask questions such as like how many different species of bats there are. That are actually, and how related they are to primates. I think we also forget to see in this biodiversity arena, like just how related we are to each other, in the sense that we rely on species so deeply, all species, great and small, all creatures great and small, for our survival. And, while bats are visible and beautiful and flying above us, and we can get to know them and see their cuteness, there are the microscopic creatures as well out there that not many people get to know because they don't have a microscope, or have never thought about how our life depends on these microscopic world, especially in the soil. My passion is certainly soil and understanding the processes that go on in soil and how that creates the possibility of plants to then grow for us to feed on, to produce oxygen, and then to grow for animals to feed on, or whether it's agriculture or, in the forests. And I think this is where fungi step into this arena, because without them, they ventured onto land at the same time plants were able to come onto land because of these symbiotic relationships they formed with fungi. And this is something still very new that we're discovering. And it's often, you know, the world unseen that we find so difficult to sort of comprehend, just how much nurturing there has to happen for us to be able to live on this planet. And I get fascinated by that a lot. And fungi are so sort of, you know, these symbiotic relationships on the roots that feed plants. Over 90% of plants get fed by these symbiotic relationships that are so intimate and so sort of in each other's face. Like the plant has to open up at some point, even some plants have to open up to some fungi to a point where they allow that infection, which we would call an infection, you know, but it's a symbiosis. It's like one allows the other to enter, and in that togetherness, they create this potential for life and formation of oxygen and food and carbohydrates, which the entire planet depends on. And I think this is why I love those obscure things that are not so obvious, trying to understand that just how much support there is, and then learning about them. I think it will just help us to really appreciate biodiversity and nature so much more. And of course, some fungi are visible, but it's this symbiotic relationship that I get most fascinated about. And of course, you know, we have about 250,000 estimated species of fungi in Australia, but we identified 5,000 of them. So we lack any sort of knowledge as to really, it's such small knowledge that we have. And it all pretty much relies on citizen science, because fungi are not something that people study a lot at universities. It's hard to get funding. And yet it boggles me that this is what our life depends on. You know, we're losing this. These species, the species diversity that's there, and not just in that respect, but also medicines. So many medicines like penicillin are made out of fungi. So the real sort of the groups that are most overlooked, I feel, often just as such a support system for biodiversity, you know, above ground. And I think with fungi as well, what gets people into fungi, which I love this part. You get kids interested in fungi because they are so quirky and different to everything else. You know, in 1969, they were considered part of plants, and they're more related to animals than to plants. And yet they were lumped with flora. And now, you know, they have their own kingdom since 1969. And to me, just shows how obscure these strange things are. And they fly their spores through space. So it's very likely they're colonizing other planets, you know, because they're so weird. And yes, NASA is even getting one of these stations, or their stations are eaten by fungi. So because their role is to decompose, you know, as well. So you've got these symbiotic relationships, and then you've got this circular sort of economy in the fungal world, because they then decompose the wood. You know, they live within the plant and are on its roots. They feed the plant, then the plant grows. And when you go up into the canopy, you see that the dead branches are colonized by fungi already doing the decomposition. So these species are so different in what they function. And yet once that drops down and becomes decomposed, it becomes soil. And once again, those branches are recycled and fed back to the mother tree. It's kind of like such a, I don't know, there's something so, I guess for me personally, it's just like a wow factor. And I know every creature has this. You know, you look at a simple bacterium or a virus and you're like, wow, like once you start to get to know, and this desire to learn more is so good. And because fungi are showy sometimes and so intricately beautiful and so cool to touch, and they don't run away. And you can photograph them from all, you know, angles. That makes them really fun to study, and yet they are so understudied. And I think getting people interested in the science of mycology, which is, you know, mycologist is someone who studies fungi, myco meaning fungi. I think like the world is becoming really aware that these things exist and how much they do in the environment, how much we can work with them to actually clean up pesticides, degrade plastics, not just pesticides, but the most awful chemicals we could think of. Fungi love eating them, you know, like they grow in Chernobyl in the reactor. They love it. They're built as a mechanism. They're designed, like it's so obvious that they're designed to be these weirdos that love mess and love cleaning it up and love, you know, they're just so weird. And I think that's why I love them, because they're such weirdos, and I'm a weirdo. So I don't know. And like, look, as I said, it's the same for every part of biodiversity. I guess you can, I would love to know everything about every creature, but I like going from the causes of, like, from the bottom up. I love that whole analogy of understanding how everything else is fed above because of something that's happening below. And I just have such appreciation for that. And I know people are very fascinated about these things as well. And I think just joining, like, I'm running a mycology research project at the moment at Woodfordia. Anyone's allowed to join. So you can basically just sign up to it online, just search the mycology research project and you'll be led to the website. And you can basically come and experiment. So we're about to set up a lab. It's a citizen science project that's been supported by the Queensland government citizen science grant. So you can actually, we're going to do experiments. We're going to isolate fungi from the environment. We're going to run DNA analyses over the next 3 years. We're going to do anything possible to do with fungi. So, like, this week, we're going to start growing some pots. Instead of having plastic pots, you can grow oyster mushroom objects. So replace, plastics. So there's just so many uses. And it just boggles me, this insane kingdom that we have. And if anyone's interested, as I said, you can always contact me directly or find the Mycology Research Project, MYCO. And and if you want to know anything else, just ask me and I'll be happy to try and answer if I know the answer.
I'm sure you will, Sandra, because of your knowledge. I'm sure you'll be able to answer any of the questions, and please keep taking them in. And I think you've probably inspired a lot more fungi enthusiasts by introducing them to it today. I think just the way you can communicate just the importance of fungi, in the environment, and just how everything sort of builds from that is just, it's really fascinating and, really compelling, and, because it just makes us really stop and think and sort of understand just that connectedness, right through the soils, through the atmosphere, essentially. But
I love that you said that connectedness, because I think I forgot to mention the fact that this whole Wood Wide Web thing that people are becoming very wow, like the entire forest is connected underground, those webs really feeding the baby plants that can't get the sunlight, that sort of also avatar that just shows the importance of that avatar concept of a tree, the mother tree feeding all the other trees and other species of trees. That boggles me, that benevolent economy, that economy of the mycelium or the web, the web through which the fungi actually live. That's how they live. The mushroom's just this, the fruit of the fungus. It's just so wonderful to learn and understand that we could actually use that template as well as an economic system, because it's based on trade, but it's based on very mostly benevolent ways of trading, which is so fascinating. I always think we could look at nature in more detail and actually try to model our own systems on that. Even I think train networks are designed in Japan based on a mold. Mold is not a fungi, but it could easily be done using fungal systems as well. Just so weird, such a strange and yet so wonderful and so useful. And I think the whole concept of biomimicry these days, looking to nature to design, I think fungi serves a great role in that. And I think we could do that with every animal and every species that we get to know. So let's get to know every species there is as much as we can.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that one. And particularly when we're talking about biodiversity and just expanding the understanding and the appreciation of, all varieties of life, that make up, this incredible planet that we have. So thanks so much, Sandra. I know there's more to talk about. So thanks for staying with us for the rest of the presentations, and you'll be here for the Q&A, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be quite a few questions for you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sandra. So on this World Environment Day and the United Nations theme of biodiversity, we're touching on different aspects of biodiversity. And as I said earlier, Australia is one of the most Australia is one of the 17 megadiverse countries in Australia. Here in the Sunshine Coast, we're also a biodiversity hotspot. conservation of species is not something that Australia has done particularly well. Even our iconic species are under threat, and we're seeing alarming declines in species such as koala. We know that habitat for koalas is habitat for many other native animals. So here to share some stories and their knowledge on the wonderful iconic species that is the koala. I'm very pleased to welcome Meghan Halverson. Hi, Meghan. So Meghan is from the Koala Crusaders. She's the ambassador for Koala Crusaders, and also Vanda Grabowski. Hi, Vanda. Thanks very much for coming. So these two incredible ladies are going to together present some information and their stories about the koala.
Hi, everybody. So, my name is Meghan Halverson. I am the ambassador for Queensland Koala Crusaders, and we've been asked to speak about biodiversity and making biodiversity sexy. So what is more sexy than a koala? To me, not much. I see them as not only iconic, but yes, sexy as well. And I've fallen in love with these little guys. So the koala was listed as vulnerable in southeast Queensland, as in New South Wales and the ACT in 2012. I can't say that we've done a great job in protecting or preserving them since that date, due to a lack of real action and political policy. After the unprecedented drought, bushfire, and climate events that we've recently had, we are recommending that they actually be listed not just as vulnerable, but as actually endangered in our local ecosystems. So Stuart spoke about bats, and they're a synergistic species, and that's very important in this as well, because without bats, we would not be pollinating koala food trees, and after events such as bushfire, it's critical that we regenerate those forests. We have many threats. I have a few slides. I don't know if they're going to end up on the screen or not, but our threats are known, and those threats come from climate change, but they're also dogs and drivers and destruction of the forests through habitat loss for development and essential infrastructure. We also look at the unprecedented bushfires and we think, how can we do better? We need to look at our fire practices and see how we can improve those all the way across the board. But most important about remembering the threats that are there, habitat loss and fragmentation is the number one reason that we're losing koalas, and not only koalas, but the thousands of other species that live underneath their umbrella. So what can we do? We can do so much more. We can demand action through all the policy that's been written. We can plant trees. We can connect those habitats and corridors. Rachel's going to speak a little bit about the project at Ringtail Ural. So there are things we can do. You can join your local conservation group. You can write to your government officials and representatives to say we need better protection, not only of koalas, but of habitat. I think we're looking at really readdressing pre-approved development applications, other ways that we can save the habitat, preserve what we have left, protect what we have left, and regenerate more for future of koalas and many other species. So I'm going to let Vanda talk to you a little bit about policy now.
Thanks, Meghan.
My name's Vanda. I'm the Policy Coordinator at Queensland Koala Crusaders, but in addition I'm the President of Koala Action Inc. in the Moreton Bay region, and I also represent Moreton Bay Koala Rescue. I guess my area of expertise probably is policy, the core component of legislative process. And there's three particular policies in play right now which are extremely important and fall short of the mark in conserving koalas. It's the South East Queensland Koala Conservation Strategy and Queensland's Koala Conservation Mapping. The two are interlinked. They are state government legislative processes that have acknowledged the severe decline of koalas for all sorts of reasons, the fundamental one being habitat loss and fragmentation. And that's across the board for all land-based species and probably also marine environments as well. They are basing their policy on mapping. And this is where the flaw comes in, because they're not addressing the full component in the mapping. And it's only with community input, you guys out there making a difference and doing what Meghan suggested, writing, emailing, ringing, and being a little bit of a squeaky wheel that will promote further action. Gandhi says we need 10% of a population before we can change a legislative process. And you're part of the 10%, so we need you guys. The mapping is fundamentally flawed. We have been writing to all of the policymakers at the Department of Environment and Science with no amendments made to the policies suggested to date. You need to have accurate mapping. You need to know where the koalas are, where they're rescued from, where the habitat is, and all these things are interlinked, and they need to form a broad umbrella so that everyone, whether you're a creator of a housing estate, a shopping centre, main roads, a railway line, construction of any sort, all developments need to address environmental components as part of their criteria for approval at all levels, be it local government level, state level, or of course national level. The other overlying, legislative framework is what's called the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. And they've had a review just recently. And this organisation forms an overarching effect. So if we don't get any success from a local government level, we go to the state government and say, listen, this is not working, animals are still dying, what can be done? If the state government can't help, then we go to a federal government level. And if we don't have an EPBC Conservation Act that actually does what it says, protect the environment, conserve the wildlife species, be they land or marine, then we are without hope. So these three legislative processes interlink to actually form a way we can protect not only the environment, but all creatures, all the flora and fauna that are part of this environment. And without protecting those, our own lives are at stake too. The interdependency that Stuart talked about, that everyone who is involved with the environment recognises, has to come into play. So we need to address the flaws. We have, as conservation groups and wildlife groups and environmental groups, we've gone and written our submissions and written our letters and recommended, but it's been all put in a too hard basket. It seems that government on all levels is concerned with money, with economic profit, with greed. They haven't factored all you guys into the equation. You know that there's more to it than money and buildings and greed. But we need your input to do this. So this is when you can write from your local perspective, from people on the Sunshine Coast looking at the bushland around them. Even one single tree forms an ecosystem that supports thousands of creatures. So we need to save the forest, one tree at a time, 2 trees, 3 trees, 4, going on. But we need this expression of interest to be recognised by our politicians and by the bureaucrats that run all this. So this is where you guys come in, and writing and ringing and so forth. If we can change these 3 fundamental legislative processes, we can actually go about saving the species. And right now they're hanging by their claws and they need your help.
Well, Vanda, I think you've really painted the real picture of this the dire situation of koalas, as have you, Meghan. We'll be bringing in Robyn Jackson from Gympie in just a moment. Vanda, I just wanted to just look at the legislative framework. So there's been numerous pieces of legislation over, a long period of time, at least 10 years, if not more, all of which have failed. They read okay on paper. A lot of input, science and evidence has gone into it.
Devil's in the detail.
Exactly. So I think what we're saying is that this draft koala strategy, is the latest piece of it's a strategy. It's not even a legislation at this stage. We're not sure whether it's going to actually become legislated. Some of the policies will become statutory, and particularly around the planning. But we're really running out of time, aren't we? Yeah, so...
The situation is urgent, because if we don't put these changes into place right now, already 68,000 hectares of habitat is unprotected. Koala habitat, primary koala habitat. They asked, the koala protected areas designated by this koala conservation strategy are out west. Out west, there's another elephant in the room, and that's climate change. Animals are moving more to the eastern seaboard. There are greater challenges of development happening along the eastern seaboard, so we need to address the climate change factor as well. And again, the land clearing interlinks, because land clearing is happening not only in the urban area, where the highest densities of koalas are, and the healthiest population are actually on the eastern coastal ranges. There is a greater impetus to clear along the coastal areas as well. So without, again, we go back to the mapping. If all of the legislation is based on the mapping and the mapping is inadequate, I would like the government to explain to me, for example, why the areas in the urban and peri-urban footprint aren't fully protected. Why are they saving a block of land here and a block of land there, and there's no way to interconnect these pieces of land? No wildlife corridors have been accommodated in this so-called koala conservation strategy. More has been left out than is actually put into the strategy. I think there's been too much liaison with the planning department and with infrastructure and development department, and it seems like the environment has just been slotted on the very bottom and put in the too hard basket. This is unacceptable.
Yeah. Agreed.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Vanda. Robyn Jackson is with Koala Action Gympie region. Robyn, your perspective from the area and the patch that you work in.
Okay. I guess my first thing I'd like to say is to agree with everything Meghan and Vanda have just said, and to point out that Gympie got left out of the South East Queensland strategy. We're too far north to even be considered. So it's like, do we have a koala population in Gympie? Well, yes, we do. The locals know about it, but does anyone else know about it? And so I just wanted to share my screen with you, if that's okay. Can I do a shared screen and just of a presentation?
Yes, we have the Go Live Tech Gurus.
Disabled it, so I can't do that actually. So it says it's disabled. But it was just about what we're doing here in Gympie. So I can just quickly grab my own presentation so I know what I'm talking about. We have a mission statement in Gympie that says creating a koala-aware community. And I think that says it all. We're really about trying to get the community on side. Vanda talked about we need people to go to their local politicians, to write to people, the government at all levels. I think the koalas really need us. And together we can make a difference. We need to learn about the koalas, what they need to live in the wild, what threats they are. A lot of people just are not still aware. Maybe the ones listening to this broadcast are, because we're all inclined to listen to biodiversity issues and be involved.
Okay.
But we're still about educating the people in our local community about what they can do to help.
Yeah, Robyn, you should be able to share your screen now.
Let me see if I can go back to it.
But you're absolutely right. It's about what every individual can do and being aware of how they can actually go about that. Yeah.
Is that coming up there? Is that coming up there? I'll just put it on the slideshow.
We could go to a question, Robyn, just while you're doing that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What I wanted to look at, what I really wanted to show was I've got one particular screen which is not coming up. Come on.
Okay.
There we go. Is that showing now? That should be showing now.
No? Yeah. We've actually, just while we're getting the technical gurus doing what we need to have done, we have a question of how much land has been cleared in the past year that was koala habitat?
Probably Vanda would be the best person to answer that rather than myself.
Okay, no, we'll go to Vanda.
It's a complicated question because we can't actually collate all of the figures. Forestry have their own reference about what they clear. Farmers and agriculturists have their own little bit. So one of the problems in the whole equation has been collating all of the figures to actually show you how much has been cleared. But the latest compilation that we've made is 78% of koala habitats already been cleared. That's really pathetic. And that means we've got to work extremely hard to save what's left. And again, that goes back to what I was saying before, is even a tree in an urban area provides a point of safety not only for a koala but for any other arboreal animal. And if we can save all these trees, we can create a corridor which can lead to better land, which needs to be saved. Water catchment land, for example, has to be saved, so we don't have to worry about that. National parks, we need to put more money and invest more into national parks because they also form core habitat for koalas and other wildlife.
So, Meghan?
Well, and the connectivity of habitat is one of the critical points in that, because in an urban development, we've recently just had a block cleared where, with a koala on site, all the protective measures were there. That was all done correctly. However, they said in council that this block of land had mostly pine trees. Yes, it had mostly pine trees, but those also supported the glossy blacks, which are also endangered. So the biodiversity level of one block of land and the main trees that the koalas were found, even on the day of clearing, were just grazed to the ground. They did save 2 other trees, but those 2 trees that they saved, although they were eucalypt, were not the trees that we used to identify the koala in. So it's really important that we also readdress, like I said before, some of these pre-approved development applications. We are pretty radical in our response to that, and we say there should be a moratorium on all land clearing of koala habitat until all of this has been addressed.
I think a lot of people don't understand that koalas are specific feeders, that there might be 700 plus eucalypts across Australia. Koalas eat 22, and they're not the same in South Australia or Victoria or New South Wales. And there's even regional variations. So koalas from the Moreton Bay region don't always eat trees from the top end of the Sunshine Coast. So you have to bear that in mind as well.
Yeah, and in terms of habitat... Go ahead, Robyn.
Sorry, we have different feeding regimes on the coast and inland, even in our own region in Gympie, and that's really quite pronounced.
Yeah.
Different types of eucalypts that they use.
Yeah.
Has anyone got my screen up yet that I've been trying to show, or I'll just go back to talking?
I just continue talking at the moment. Thanks, Robyn, and appreciate you bearing with us. I mean, we're putting together this live production, so thanks very much.
That's okay. What I was trying to demonstrate was how people can assist us with reporting koala sightings. Vanda mentioned the fact that they're relying on the mapping, and the mapping is extremely flawed. Even in the last 2 years, where I've got a little, when it comes up on the slide, it just shows the difference between koala reported sightings 2 years ago compared to now, just because of the citizen science of having our local citizens involved. They need to come in and report they need to report the sightings to us as much as possible. And Gympie Regional Council recently released a thing called Wild Watch, which once again, if the slideshow comes up, I'll have a link to that. But it's on the Gympie Regional Council website under Environment, and they can report the sightings of koalas on that. You can report lots of other animals as well. They actually have developed all of the species that they're concerned with in the Gympie region, so obviously not just koalas. And you can report the sightings of all of those on this Wild Watch program. It's fantastic, and it's going to, I think, be of great assistance. But that's why I'm saying we should not have been left out of the southeast Queensland area. And I don't think the people north of us in Maryborough and Harvey Bay would like to be left out of it either, because we've had a lot of dealings with koalas in those areas too.
Yeah, absolutely, Robyn. And I think SCEC and other conservation groups have been advocating very strongly for the conservation strategy to be extended across Queensland and most certainly Wide Bay, of the area that Gympie falls within. There was very much a focus, as you point out, on southeast Queensland, where we do, have a lot of threats and a bit of tying in with the SEQ regional plan as well, and also with the strategy and the mapping itself. So we'll definitely be backing your calls for the conservation strategy to be extended through the Wide Bay region. Are you seeing any momentum around some on-ground protections and even from a local council level, Robyn?
We were. We've just got a new council, and of course there's been a significant change, and we haven't yet developed the rapport with the local council, the new ones, that is. We went out this morning, myself and the publicity officer, to a development at Widgie, out the west of Gympie, which has been, it was approved back in 2012, so a long time ago. But our last council put certain restrictions on this gentleman, all because of the koalas. And he's appealing against it again. So we'll be going correspondent on that again with his appeal. But it's all about keeping the trees and the habitat. That's so important, and the locals out there are up in arms about it. They really don't want these koala trees knocked down, and the council has put restrictions on some of them. And this is not a really high koala habitat area it's not nearly as bad as what some other places have been, but we've just got to preserve every little bit that we possibly can, particularly the corridors. And on this particular development, there are 2 creeks, and he's objecting to 50 metres either side of 2 creeks. But I mean, goodness me, that's just logic to keep that corridor going.
Yeah,
anyway.
And when a species is in such a critical status as the koala, we really can't be at the point of just trying to stop each individual development or threat, that continues to come unabated. It has to have that strategic protection, and the legislative protection, as Vanda described, in terms of environmental laws and also planning laws that need to come into play to protect species, particularly the koala, and as Meghan explained as well, all the other native animals that actually need that habitat that koalas frequent as well, and the diversity of that habitat that koalas need for their support and viability as well. So, whether an area is mapped or not, we've all seen, lots of development plans, and there are a lot of concentric circles or, coloured blocks on management plans and things like that. But we know the physicality, what happens in the landscape, if these inappropriate developments proceed, knowing that the species, as Vanda, very graphically and in ways of, really getting that understanding and trying to grasp the tenuous status of the koala. They're literally hanging on by their claws, and there's these compounding threats, not only from habitat loss and destruction, and disease and mortality and vehicle strikes and things like that, but certainly climate change. So all of these compounding factors on a species that it really is, in declining numbers, we can't afford to, pussyfoot around the edges, can we, Vanda?
I think we are in the unfortunate position of being at the beginning of the extinction of koala if the status quo remains. And if we can't even take advantage of the existing rules and regulations that are flouted by developers, because they can easily pay a fine for illegally clearing habitat, a fine of $30,000 is nothing to them when they can sell houses for hundreds and thousands of dollars. And there hasn't even been a code of practice developed by the state government so that if a developer does go onto a property, no matter what that or who that developer is, they should follow a particular code when cutting a tree. There should be koala spotters there. There should be some process that actually looks after the animals to ensure that animals aren't killed during the clearing process. Even that the government has fallen short on.
So while there's a range of areas that obviously need improvement, there are some really positive efforts that are being undertaken to help conserve koalas and help enhance and restore their habitat. I'm really delighted that Rachel Lyons, the Business Development Manager from Noosa and District Landcare, and a wildlife carer herself, is joining the panel this afternoon. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Good. So you've heard some of the discussion previously, and now I'm sure you'll join us for the Q&A later on. But tell us more about Noosa and District Landcare.
Noosa and District Landcare is a landcare group that's been operating for almost close to 30 years, based out of Pomona in the Noosa hinterland. And we work on a whole variety of different projects, but I'd like to talk about one particular one. It's a really positive projects, not just for koalas, but for a whole heap of other species as well. Now, I'm going to try to share my screen, and I'm hoping it works. Okay, let me have a go.
Here we
Is
go.
it working?
It's looking good. Well, it's blank, but it means something's happening. Here we go.
Okay, is that working?
Yes.
It is.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Just
brilliant. Okay. it's got its own little timer happening. Anyway, so I'd like to talk about the Noosa Koala Habitat Restoration Project, and it's really the fact that I had to try and squeeze so many logos on the screen means it's really a partnership project to the max. So, and it's got its own mind at the moment, so as it does. But basically, this project was the brainchild of the Noosa Parks Association, and in particular, Michael Gloucester. He started lobbying for this project to happen a number of years ago and enlisted the help of both the Noosa Council and also the Department of Environment and Science. So effectively what's happened is we've had 2,400 hectares of lease acquired through a $3.5 million buyout of the forestry lease from Hancock Queensland Plantations. And basically that has two parts to it, and a staged conversion to national park over different sections. But it requires approximately over 1,000 hectares of explantation, both hardwood and softwood, needing to be rehabilitated over the next few years, which is a really large parcel of land in anyone's books. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be the largest habitat restoration project we've seen in Queensland to date.
Wow, that's great.
So not only does it look at koalas, but there's over 25 threatened species, plants and animals, that are within the 2,400 hectares. And koalas are the flagship that seem to motivate a lot of people, including funding bodies, which is really convenient. But there's a whole host of species that sit underneath the koala. So can you hear me still?
Yes, keep going. Thanks,
Yeah,
Rachel.
cool.
Sorry.
Right, so within the 1,000 hectares that are being restored, there's quite a lot of work involved there. If you can imagine coming into a site after it's been cleared of pine or hardwood, there's lots of debris on the land. Some of these areas haven't had any native habitat on them for a good 50 years. So a lot of the seed stock of eucalypts, for example, has been extinguished. So the job that we're doing is going in and doing weed control, including pine wildling removal. And also infilling in with the eucalypt and the canopy species that need to be replaced. Some areas have got nice, good regrowth of shrubs and understory happening, but are lacking that canopy diversity. So there's effectively a number of stages. The project is large. Stage one, can you hear me still?
Yeah, it's just breaking up a little bit, but keep going. I'm sure it'll sort itself out. Thank you.
I'm a bit out in the sticks here, so that's probably why.
What a wonderful place to be.
It is nice in the sticks, yes. So stage one is for the northern ringtail area, which is kind of near just outside of Boring Point, probably the best way to describe it. So we were really fortunate early on in the project to be able to secure some funding from the Body Shop under their World BioBridge program, which is a global program that is raised through the sales of particular products by the Body Shop around the world. So we were one of three projects to acquire funding, or to receive funding for in the 2018 year. And that was an application that was put up by Queensland Koala Crusaders in partnership with Noosa Landcare. And when we realised that we had this funding, to our great surprise, the Body Shop Australia jumped on board as well. And so in addition to the funding that we had from at a global level, the Body Shop Australia also decided they'd jump in and try to match the funding. So I don't know if you can see in the screen here, we've got a heap of our staff wearing headscarves and different things. So basically this was a merchandising program, and it in itself raised over $71,000 for this project, which was amazing. Yeah. Blew us all away. But so together it was about $150,000 that came in from the Body Shop, which is just amazing. They're really a bit of a left field funding body for us, which was great. So what we've done with that money today, and we have actually completed stage one, is we've undertaken close to 90 hectares of the project work to date, which is over 24,000 trees in the ground. And as you can see in the photos, there was quite a lot of pine wildlings to remove in some sections. Lots of sort of regrowth happening that we were planting in amongst because we had an absence of eucalypt trees coming through. And one of the good things about the project is we've got a program at the moment called the Kabi Capacity Building Program, where we have a number of trainees involved in the project, so they were heavily involved right from the beginning. We had a couple of tree planting events, so these were heavily booked out. We had to cut registrations off about a week and a half, 2 weeks out. So over 130 to 150 people at both events, really, really heavily supported by the community, which was amazing to see. And I'll just wrap up because I think I'm getting close to my time, but stage 2 of the project, which we're undertaking at the moment, is being funded by the Peppers Noosa Resort and Spas through the Trees for Tourism partnership with Tourism Noosa. So it's about 13 hectares underway in that stage of the project. So we're working on both the softwood scrubs down, the softwood plantation areas in Ringtail, but also kicking up into the Ural forest area in the hardwood section. And we're already working on stage 3, which is basically funding for the remainder of the program. And there's agreements and funding arrangements being negotiated right as we speak. So watch that space. But it's a very exciting project to be involved in.
Yeah. That's sort of fabulous. Yeah, that's fabulous, Rachel. And such a significant contribution to habitat restoration, as I say, not only for koalas, but for other threatened and common species as well. It's obviously a huge project, but it has to start somewhere. How long do you anticipate this is going to go for, and when do you expect to see those habitat values come through?
The actual work on the ground, we had envisaged over about a 10-year project, but it's looking like it's going to be a lot shorter than that now. So within the next 5 years to be completed, hopefully. But we're already, you just need to go onto the sites. There's already, birds and everything, flying around and making use of the area. So, but it's a massive project. It's going to have large-scale implications for not only the Noosa Shire, but sort of the wider corridor coming down from Koala right down into sort of the Coolum Sunshine Coast area. So it's really exciting one to be involved in.
It is, and well done to yourself and the Noosa District Landcare team and all the other partners as well. I think that's been a hallmark of this project, really coming to life the way that it has, with that collaboration and the partnerships to really make it happen.
Definitely, yep. Lots of partners.
Yeah. Well, you do an amazing job at Noosa District Landcare. We're really honoured to have you as one of our member groups as well, and you've always punched well above your weight and just do some incredible projects and incredible work and education as well. So I encourage people to check out not only the project Rachel's described just now, but also all the work that Noosa District Landcare do, and also Queensland Koala Crusaders and the Gympie Koala group that Robyn's been part of as well. We've got a little bit of time for some questions and some panel discussion as well. So we've got a question that comes in for Stuart Parsons. Are you there, still online with us there, Stuart?
Yep, I'm still here.
Great. Thank you. A question's come through. What is white noise syndrome and how does it kill bats?
So white nose syndrome is a fungus. White noise syndrome is where lots of noise comes
text,
in and upsets. Autocorrect got them. So white nose syndrome is a fungal infection that they think originated in Europe, but it's gotten into bats in North America, and it's absolutely devastating the bats of North America. And the way, no one really knows how it got into North America, but what happens is it tends to infect bats when they're hibernating. So in the wintertime, they'll be in their roosts or in their caves and things hibernating, and they'll get this fungal infection, and it's called white nose because they get these little bits of white fungal spores and things around their nose. And the problem is that bats will feed really heavily before they go into hibernation, and they need all of their fat and energy reserves to be able to survive a long winter without waking up and without feeding. But the fungus stimulates their immune system, and so their body wakes up to a certain degree to be able to fight off the infection, and then they simply don't have the energy to survive the winter. So it started in the northeast of the US, and it's spread across to the west coast now in pockets in Washington state. It's in Canada. And it's driven one of North America's most common species to close to extinction.
Goodness.
It's a terrible, terrible disease.
Goodness. So at this stage, to your knowledge, it's not in Australia?
No, we keep an eye out for it, and we have protocols in case, I travel overseas, I do work overseas to make very sure that I don't bring it in, and other bat researchers are the same. It could, if we're not careful, get into Australia, but we're being pretty vigilant, and it's not known to be here. There's been the odd time when people have worried that they've seen a bat in a cave or something like that, and they think it might do, and it's been investigated, and it's not been detected yet.
Yeah. So we've got the so biosecurity is absolutely critical, for our biodiversity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and with our mycologists as Sandra, there's the good fungi and the not so good fungi, as you say, of how it can actually get into the other species as well. But thank you all very much for participating this afternoon. I think everyone has learnt so much around the biodiversity, not only of the Sunshine Coast, but the broader concept of biodiversity and the natural systems that support us. Biodiversity is not just a day or a theme for a festival. It's something that has to be supported and protected and enhanced each and every day. And the people that have contributed to this discussion this afternoon are all those and more. The message, it seems, and I'm sure everyone watching and tuning in and sending questions through, is to understand that interconnectedness of how important it is to understand how much we rely on our biodiversity, the threats that the biodiversity of our country and around the world are under, and what we need to do to turn those declines around, and to celebrate the amazing megadiverse environments that we have here in Australia, and do everything we possibly can to protect it and enhance it. So thank you all so much. We really can't thank you enough for your contributions and for the work that you all do. It literally and incredibly makes such a difference all the time. So thank you very, very much for joining the Sunshine Coast Environment Council on this World Environment Day Festival.